On Father's Day, my millionaire son traveled to visit me and asked, "Dad, how are you liking the beach house I gave you?" I was in shock and replied, "What beach house? I'm living in the neighbor gardener's garage." When I revealed this, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I never expected my son's visit on Father's Day to shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. At 61, I'd grown accustomed to disappointment, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that Sunday morning. Marcus pulled up in his gleaming Tesla, the same confident smile I remembered from his childhood lighting up his face. I was tending to Mr. Rodriguez's garden when I heard the car door slam. My hands were still covered in soil when my son wrapped me in a hug that felt both familiar and foreign. "Dad, you look good," he said, though I caught the slight frown as he took in my work clothes. "Taking care of the yard yourself, huh?" I wiped my hands on my jeans, feeling suddenly self-conscious. Marcus looked every inch the successful tech executive he'd become. Designer clothes, expensive watch, that air of prosperity that seemed to follow him everywhere. Meanwhile, I stood there in my faded work shirt, smelling of fertilizer and sweat. "Someone's got to do it," I said, forcing a smile. The truth was more complicated, but how do you explain to your successful son that you're living in a converted garage because his wife told him you preferred your independence? We walked toward what Marcus assumed was still my house, the two-story colonial where I'd raised him after his mother died. Sandra answered the door with her practiced smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. She kissed Marcus hello, but barely acknowledged me beyond a curt nod. "Marcus, honey, you should see how well your father is doing," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "He's been so busy with his gardening projects." Inside, everything looked exactly as it had when I lived there. My furniture, my photos, even my old reading chair by the window. Sandra had preserved it like a museum, a perfect set piece for Marcus's visits. What he didn't know was that I hadn't slept in that house for over 2 years. We sat in what used to be my living room, making small talk about Marcus's latest business ventures. Sandra hovered nearby, interjecting whenever I tried to speak, steering the conversation away from anything too personal. It was a dance we'd perfected over the years, though Marcus had never noticed the choreography. "Dad," Marcus said suddenly, leaning forward with excitement, "I've been meaning to ask, what do you think of the beach house I got you?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face go cold, my hands trembling slightly as I set down my coffee cup. "What beach house?" Marcus laughed, thinking I was joking. "Come on, Dad. The place in Santa Barbara. 3 bedrooms, ocean view. Sandra said you absolutely loved it when she showed you the photos." I looked at Sandra, whose face had gone completely pale. Her usual composure cracked for just a moment, and I saw something raw and panicked in her eyes before she quickly recovered. "Marcus, your father is getting older," she said quickly. "Sometimes he forgets things." But I wasn't forgetting anything. I was living in Mr. Rodriguez's converted garage, sleeping on a narrow cot, cooking on a hot plate, and using his outdoor bathroom. For the past 2 years, while Sandra told Marcus I was enjoying my independence and keeping busy with projects, I'd been surviving on Social Security and the small amounts Mr. Rodriguez paid me for yard work. "Sandra," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt, "I think there's been some confusion." She shot me a warning look, the same look she'd been giving me for years whenever I tried to speak up during Marcus's visits. But this time, I couldn't stay silent. "Son," I continued, meeting Marcus's confused gaze, "I don't have a beach house. I haven't had a house at all for 2 years. I've been living in Mr. Rodriguez's garage next door." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, then a dawning horror as he processed what I'd just said. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Sandra, tell him about the house. Tell him about the money I sent." Sandra stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For once in her life, she had no quick answer, no smooth explanation. Marcus stood up abruptly, his voice rising. Sandra, I sent you $300,000 6 months ago to buy Dad a place by the ocean. Where is that money? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I watched my daughter-in-law's face crumble as she realized her carefully constructed web of lies was finally unraveling. But what scared me more than her deception was the look of betrayal that was slowly spreading across my son's face. After 2 years of silent suffering, of accepting scraps and pretending everything was fine, the truth was finally coming out. But as I sat there watching my family fall apart, I wondered if the truth was worth the price we were all about to pay. The weight of Marcus's stare felt heavier than anything I'd carried in years. As Sandra scrambled for excuses, memories flooded back, memories I'd tried so hard to bury. I needed him to understand how we'd gotten here, how a father and son could become strangers living in the same town. It started 3 years ago, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Remember when I had that heart attack? Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. Of course I remember. Sandra said you were recovering well, that you wanted to take things slow. I closed my eyes, remembering those early days in the hospital. Sandra had been there constantly, playing the devoted daughter-in-law, speaking to doctors, handling paperwork. She'd seemed like an angel then. After I got out of the hospital, I couldn't work my construction job anymore. The medical bills started piling up, and I fell behind on everything. I looked at my hands, still marked by decades of hard labor. Sandra offered to help with the paperwork, said she'd make sure you knew what was happening. But I never knew, Marcus said, his voice hollow. She told me you were fine, that you'd figured everything out. Sandra finally found her voice. David, you told me you didn't want to worry Marcus. You said you could handle it yourself. No, I said firmly, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. I begged you to call him. I asked you every week if you told Marcus about the foreclosure notice. The word foreclosure hit Marcus like a slap. He sank back into his chair, staring at me with wide eyes. Dad, why didn't you call me yourself? This was the part that hurt the most to explain. I tried. Every time I called your office, they said you were in meetings. When I called your cell, it went straight to voicemail. Sandra said you were going through a stressful time at work, that she was screening your calls to protect you. I remembered those desperate days, dialing Marcus's number over and over, leaving messages that were never returned. I'd thought my son had simply grown too successful, too important to deal with his old man's problems. She told me you'd gotten a new phone number for business, I continued. Said she'd give it to me when things settled down. I was too proud to keep pushing, too afraid of being a burden. Sandra's face had gone from pale to red. David, you're making me sound like some kind of villain. I was trying to help both of you. Help? The word came out sharper than I intended. When the bank took the house, where was that help? When I had to sell everything I owned just to pay for my medications, where was Marcus? You told him I was downsizing by choice, that I wanted a simpler life. Marcus was shaking his head slowly, like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. This can't be real. Sandra showed me pictures of you looking happy, working in gardens, enjoying retirement. Those pictures were real, I said. But what you didn't know was that I was working in other people's gardens because I needed the money to eat. Mr. Rodriguez was the only one who would hire a 60-year-old man with heart problems. I thought about those first months in the garage. Mr. Rodriguez had found me sleeping in my car after I'd been evicted. He spoke limited English, but he understood dignity. He offered me work and a place to sleep, asking no questions. Sandra would come by once a month, I continued, my throat tight. She'd take pictures of me working, told me to smile and look healthy, said it would make Marcus happy to see I was staying active. Marcus turned to his wife, his voice dangerously quiet. You took pictures of my father living in poverty and used them to convince me he was fine. Sandra's composure finally cracked completely. Marcus, you don't understand the pressure I was under. Your company was going through that merger. You were working 18-hour days. I was trying to protect you from stress that could have ruined everything we'd worked for. Everything we'd worked for? Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. What about what he worked for? What about the man who raised me after Mom died, who worked double shifts to pay for my college? The silence stretched between us. I watched Sandra realize that her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing. For 3 years, she'd managed to keep Marcus and me apart while he unknowingly funded a life I wasn't living. "The money I sent for the beach house," Marcus said slowly, still staring out the window. "Where did it go?" Sandra's hands were shaking now. I almost felt sorry for her, watching her search for another lie that might save her. We were waiting for the right property to come up," she stammered. "Real estate prices were so high, I wanted to make sure David got the best value." $300,000, Marcus repeated. "For 6 months, you've had $300,000 while my father lived in a garage." The number hung in the air like an accusation. I'd been living on less than $1,000 a month, rationing my heart medication, eating 1 meal a day, while enough money to buy me a decent home sat somewhere, doing nothing. As I watched the truth destroy what was left of my son's marriage, I wondered if I should have kept quiet. Some secrets once spoken can never be taken back. Marcus walked to the window, his shoulders rigid with barely contained rage. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by Sandra's shallow breathing. I could see her mind working, calculating, trying to find a way out of the corner she'd painted herself into. "Show me," Marcus said without turning around. His voice was cold, controlled in a way that reminded me of his mother when she was truly angry. "Show me the bank statements, the real estate listings, the contracts. Show me where my father's money went." Sandra's laugh came out high and brittle. "Marcus, you're being dramatic. The money is safe. It's just what?" He spun around, and I saw a fury in my son's eyes that I'd never witnessed before. "It's just earning interest while my father rations his heart medication?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't told him about the medication, but somehow he'd guessed. Sandra's face went white as she realized how much Marcus was putting together. "How did you know about the medication?" I asked quietly. Marcus's expression softened when he looked at me, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. "Because I know what your prescriptions cost, Dad. I looked it up after Mom died when I was worried about you managing on your own. 60-year-old men don't just cut back on heart medication unless they have to." He was right. I'd been splitting pills, skipping doses, telling myself it was fine as long as I didn't overexert myself. Some days, when the chest pains came, I'd sit on Mr. Rodriguez's old lawn chair and wonder if this was how I'd die. Alone in a garage, too proud to admit I needed help. Sandra stood up abruptly, smoothing down her dress. "I don't have to listen to this. David, tell him you're fine. Tell him you chose this life." "Sit down," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the room like ice. "We're not done here." She sat, but her hands were clenched in her lap, her knuckles white with tension. Marcus pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. $300,000 transferred to your personal account 6 months ago. The memo said, "Dad's Beach House Fund." "Where is it, Sandra?" The question hung in the air. I watched my daughter-in-law's face cycle through emotions, panic, calculation, defiance. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "It's in investments." "What kind of investments?" The kind that will grow for David's future." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Really? Because according to my bank records, $25,000 went to Nordstrom last month. Another $15,000 to that spa retreat you took with your sister. Should I keep going?" I felt sick. While I'd been eating beans and rice for dinner every night, Sandra had been shopping with money meant to give me a home. While I'd been wondering if I could afford my next doctor's appointment, she'd been getting massage treatments. "Marcus, you don't understand," Sandra started, but he cut her off. "I understand perfectly. You saw an opportunity and you took it. My father was inconvenient. His problems were messy, so you found a way to make him disappear while still looking like the caring daughter-in-law." Sandra's mask finally slipped completely. The sweet, concerned woman vanished, replaced by someone cold and calculating. Fine. You want the truth? Your father was a burden. He was sick, he was broke, and he was going to drag us down with him. I protected our future. Our future, Marcus repeated slowly. What about his future? He's old, Marcus. How much future does he really have? The cruelty of those words hit the room like a bomb. I felt something break inside my chest, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. This woman had looked at me, a man who'd worked his whole life, who'd raised a son alone, who'd asked for nothing but dignity, and decided I was disposable. Marcus stared at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. Get out, he said quietly. What? Get out of this house, now. Sandra stood up, her composure cracking again. Marcus, this is our home. You can't just... This is my father's home. This is his furniture, his belongings, his life that you've been playing house with for 2 years. Get out before I call the police. You're overreacting, she tried one more time, but Marcus was already at the phone. I'm calling my lawyer, then I'm calling the police. You have 15 minutes to pack whatever clothes you need and leave. Everything else we'll sort out in court. Sandra looked at me then, and I saw something desperate in her eyes. David, tell him this is all a misunderstanding. Tell him you're happy with your life. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 61 years in my bones. The only thing I'm happy about, I said quietly, is that my son finally knows the truth. She gathered her purse, her hand shaking with rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. At the door, she turned back one more time. You'll regret this, Marcus. Both of you will regret this. After she left, Marcus and I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt different somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the walls themselves. But the damage was done, and we both knew it. Dad, Marcus said finally, his voice thick with emotion, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have checked on you myself. I looked at my son, this successful man I'd raised, and felt a mixture of pride and heartbreak. You couldn't have known, she made sure of that. But I should have tried harder. I should have... No, I interrupted. This isn't your fault. Sandra fooled us both. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was overwhelmed. What do we do now? How do we fix this? I didn't have an answer. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together the same way. But as I sat in my old chair in my old house with my son beside me for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next 3 days passed in a blur of lawyers, bank statements, and painful revelations. Marcus had taken time off work, something Sandra had always claimed he could never do, and thrown himself into unraveling the web of lies that had defined our family for years. I moved back into my own house that first night, sleeping in my own bed for the first time in 2 years. The familiar sounds, the way the moonlight fell across my bedroom floor, the comfort of my own pillow. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by everything that had changed and everything that couldn't be undone. Marcus had been relentless in his investigation. He'd discovered that Sandra hadn't just spent the beach house money on shopping sprees and spa treatments. She'd invested heavily in a business venture with her brother, a restaurant that had failed within 6 months, taking $100,000 with it. Another $50,000 had gone to credit card debt she'd hidden from Marcus. The remaining funds were scattered across various accounts, some of which she'd emptied just days before Marcus's Father's Day visit. She knew, Marcus said, pacing around my kitchen on Wednesday morning. She knew I was planning to visit, and she was trying to cover her tracks. I poured coffee for both of us, my hands steadier than they'd been in months. Having access to my own kitchen again, being able to make coffee without rationing it, felt like a small miracle. What did your lawyer say? That we have a strong case for financial fraud, elder abuse, and theft. Marcus sat down heavily at the table. But Dad, there's something else we need to talk about. The seriousness in his voice made my stomach clench. What is it? Sandra's pregnant. The words hit me like cold water. I set down my coffee cup, staring at my son's face. He looked exhausted, aged by the stress of the past few days. How long have you known? I asked. She told me last night. When I served her with the separation papers, Marcus rubbed his forehead. She's 3 months along. I felt a familiar weight settle in my chest, the same weight I'd carried for 2 years, the feeling of being an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. And now you're wondering if you should reconcile with her. No, Marcus said firmly, that's not what I'm wondering at all. What she did to you is unforgivable. The money, the lies, the isolation, I can't get past that. But she's carrying your child. He nodded, and I saw the conflict in his eyes. This was my son, the boy I'd raised to value family above everything else. The same values that had made Sandra's deception so effective were now tearing him apart. Marcus, I said carefully, what does she want? To come home, to pretend this never happened. She's claiming the pregnancy hormones made her irrational, that she was trying to protect our marriage by not burdening me with your problems. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Even now, caught red-handed, Sandra was spinning another story, another manipulation. And you believe that? Of course not. But Marcus looked at me with pain in his eyes. Dad, what kind of father does this make me? What kind of man divorces his pregnant wife? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Sandra's car in the driveway. Marcus tensed, his jaw setting in that stubborn line I knew so well. She's not supposed to be here, he said. The restraining order doesn't apply to me, I finished. This is still my house. I opened the door to find Sandra standing there, and for a moment I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfectly put-together woman who'd manipulated us for years. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. She looked desperate, broken, and somehow more dangerous than ever. David, she said, her voice small and pleading. Can we talk, please? Marcus appeared behind me, his presence protective but tense. You're not supposed to be here, Sandra. I'm not here to see you, she said, not taking her eyes off me. I'm here to talk to David, to apologize. I almost closed the door right then, but something in her voice, a raw desperation I'd never heard before, made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch, her hands folded in her lap like a child called to the principal's office. David, I know you hate me. I know what I did was wrong. Wrong doesn't begin to cover it, Marcus said from the doorway. Sandra flinched, but continued looking at me. I was scared. When you got sick, when the bills started piling up, I was terrified it would destroy everything Marcus had worked for. His company was going through a merger, we'd just bought our house, and suddenly there were all these medical expenses and mortgage payments, and so you decided to make me disappear, I said quietly. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I thought it would be temporary. I thought once Marcus's business stabilized, once things settled down, we could figure out a better solution. But then months passed, and it got easier to just maintain the lie. Easier for who? The anger in my voice surprised even me. It sure as hell wasn't easier for me, sleeping in a garage, rationing medication, wondering why my son had abandoned me. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, David. But I'm pregnant now, and this stress, it's not good for the baby. Can't we find a way to work this out, for the sake of the family? Marcus stepped forward, his voice hard. Now you care about family? Sandra looked up at him, and I saw a flash of the manipulative woman I knew so well. This is your child, Marcus. Our child. You really want him growing up in a broken home because of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Marcus's voice rose. You stole $300,000 and left my father homeless. You call that a misunderstanding? I call it a mistake, Sandra shot back, some of her old fire returning. A mistake that we can fix if you stop being so stubborn. David can move in with us. There's plenty of room in our house. We can be one big happy family. The suggestion hung in the air like poison gas. I looked at Sandra, then at Marcus, and realized this was the moment of truth. She was offering what looked like a solution, a way for Marcus to have his father and his pregnant wife under one roof, a way to keep the family together. But I'd learned something in those 2 years of silence and suffering. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to be the reason they compromise their principles. "No," I said quietly. Sandra blinked. "What?" I said no. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years. "I won't be the excuse you use to manipulate my son. I won't move into your house and pretend everything is fine while you teach my grandchild that lies are acceptable as long as you don't get caught." Sandra's face went through several emotions: shock, anger, calculation. "David, you're being unreasonable. Think about the baby." "I am thinking about the baby," I replied. "I'm thinking about what kind of person that child will become if he's raised by someone who thinks elder abuse is a misunderstanding." "Gee." Marcus was staring at me with something that looked like pride. Sandra, realizing she was losing control of the situation, played her final card. "Fine," she said, standing up and placing a protective hand over her belly. "But when this baby is born and asks why Grandpa David isn't in his life, what am I supposed to tell him? That you chose revenge over family?" Sandra's words about the baby hung in the air like a threat wrapped in sentimentality. I watched her standing there, one hand protectively over her belly, using her unborn child as a weapon in her war for control. It was masterfully done, I had to admit. She knew exactly how to twist the knife. Marcus's face was a battlefield of emotions. I could see him struggling, torn between his justified anger at Sandra's betrayal and his deep-seated desire to be a good father. The pregnancy had complicated everything, adding layers of guilt and obligation that Sandra wielded like an expert. "You'll tell him the truth," I said finally, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. "You'll tell him that his mother chose lies over love, manipulation over honesty, and maybe, if you're lucky, he'll learn from your mistakes instead of repeating them." Sandra's composure cracked again. "David, please. I made mistakes, but I can change. We can all move forward together." "Some things can't be undone," I replied. "Trust, once broken, doesn't just magically repair itself because it's convenient." Marcus stepped closer to me, and I felt his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, what if we tried family therapy? What if we worked through this together?" I looked at my son, seeing the hope in his eyes, the desperate need to believe that his growing family could somehow be salvaged. It broke my heart to watch him struggle with this impossible situation. "Marcus," I said gently, "I need to tell you something that happened last month. Something I didn't mention before." Sandra's face went white. She knew what I was about to say. "I had a heart episode while working in Mr. Rodriguez's garden. The pain was so bad I couldn't breathe, couldn't stand. Mr. Rodriguez called 911, and they took me to the emergency room." Marcus's grip on my shoulder tightened. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I tried to call Sandra from the hospital. I begged her to contact you, told her the doctors said I needed someone to make medical decisions if my condition worsened." I looked directly at Sandra, who was now trembling. "Do you want to tell him what you said, or should I?" Sandra's voice came out as a whisper. "David, please. She said you were in important meetings all week, that she'd handle any medical decisions herself as my emergency contact." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest as I remembered that conversation. But what she really meant was that she didn't want you to know I was sick again, because if you knew, you might ask questions about why I was living in a garage instead of the beach house you'd paid for. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus slowly removed his hand from my shoulder and turned to face his wife. "You knew he was in the hospital and you didn't tell me?" "Marcus, I was trying to protect you from what?" His voice was rising again. "From being there for my father when he needed me? From being the son he raised me to be?" Sandra started crying again, but these tears felt different, more calculated, more performed. "I was scared, okay? I was scared that if you knew how sick he was getting, you'd blame me for not taking better care of him. And instead you decided to let him possibly die alone in a hospital room," Marcus said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "He didn't die," Sandra protested. He was fine. No, I said quietly. I wasn't fine. I spent 3 days in that hospital wondering if I'd ever see my son again, wondering if I'd die without ever getting the chance to tell him how proud I am of the man he became. Marcus sat down heavily in my old reading chair, his head in his hands. The weight of everything, the stolen money, the lies, the isolation, and now this final betrayal was crushing him. I wanted to comfort him, but I knew he needed to work through this himself. "There's more," Sandra said suddenly, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "Things you both need to know before you make any permanent decisions." Marcus looked up, exhaustion written across his face. "What now, Sandra?" "The restaurant investment with my brother, it wasn't a failure. It was successful, very successful." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the business is thriving. My brother bought out 2 more locations last month. The money isn't gone, Marcus. It's growing." Marcus stood up slowly, his face going through several expressions as he processed this information. "You told me the restaurant failed. You said the investment was a total loss." I lied. Sandra's voice was barely audible. "I kept the money in the business because I thought, if things got bad between us, if you ever wanted to divorce me, I'd have something to fall back on." The room felt like it was spinning. This woman had not only stolen my son's money and used my suffering as a cover story, but she'd also been planning for the eventual failure of her marriage while playing the devoted wife. "So let me understand this," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You took money meant to buy my father a home, invested it in a business, lied to me about the business failing, and kept the profits as insurance against our marriage ending?" Sandra nodded, tears streaming down her face. "But Marcus, I can make this right. The business is worth more now than what you originally sent. We can buy David an even better house, a bigger place. Everyone wins." "Everyone wins?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dad spent 2 years living in poverty, while you built a secret nest egg with his money. How exactly does everyone win in that scenario?" Before Sandra could answer, there was a knock at the door. Through the window, I could see a young woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase. "That'll be my lawyer," Marcus said. "I called her this morning." Sandra's face went pale again. "Marcus, please, think about the baby. Think about our future." "I am thinking about the future," Marcus replied, as he went to answer the door. "I'm thinking about what kind of father I want to be, and what kind of example I want to set for my child." As the lawyer entered and began discussing legal options, Sandra made one final desperate play. She turned to me, her voice taking on the sweet, manipulative tone I knew so well. "David, you have grandchildren to think about now. Don't let your hurt feelings rob this baby of a relationship with his grandfather. Be the bigger person here." I looked at this woman who had systematically destroyed my life while smiling to my face, who had used my love for my son as a weapon against both of us, and I realized something profound. I didn't need to be angry anymore. Anger gave her power over me, made me reactive and predictable. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete clarity about who I was and what I wanted. "Sandra," I said calmly, "I will be in this baby's life if and when Marcus decides that's what's best for his child. But I won't be manipulated into it, and I won't pretend that what you did was acceptable just to keep the peace." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You keep talking about being the bigger person, but you've forgotten what that actually means. The bigger person doesn't enable lies. The bigger person doesn't sacrifice their dignity for the illusion of family harmony. The bigger person stands up for what's right, even when it's hard." Sandra stared at me like I was a stranger, and in many ways I suppose I was. The broken, desperate man she'd manipulated for 2 years was gone. In his place stood someone who had learned the difference between being loving and being a victim. 6 months later, I stood in the workshop behind my house, running my hands over the smooth surface of a rocking chair I'd been crafting for weeks. The wood was cherry, hand-selected from a local mill, and every joint was perfect. It was the kind of work I'd dreamed of doing when I was younger, before life got in the way, before I spent decades in construction, just trying to make ends meet. The settlement with Sandra had been surprisingly straightforward, faced with evidence of fraud and the testimony of both Marcus and Mr. Rodriguez. Her lawyer had advised her to cooperate. The business she'd secretly invested in was indeed successful, worth nearly $500,000 by the time everything was sorted out. Marcus received back his original investment plus substantial damages, and I received enough to secure my future without ever having to depend on anyone again. Sandra had moved back to her mother's house in Oregon to have the baby. Marcus visited her there once a month, maintaining a civil relationship for the sake of their child, but the marriage was over. The divorce had been finalized just last week. "Dad, that's beautiful work," Marcus said from behind me. I turned to see him standing in the workshop doorway, holding his 3-month-old son in his arms. Baby David, named after me, much to Sandra's dismay, was a perfect blend of his parents, with Marcus's dark hair and Sandra's green eyes. But when he looked at me, I saw none of Sandra's calculating intelligence, just the open, trusting gaze of a child who didn't yet know that the world could be cruel. "Thank you," I said, setting down my sandpaper. "It's for him, actually. I figured he might like having a rocking chair when he gets old enough to sit in one properly." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. "He'll love it. You know, Sandra was wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "She said you'd never be part of his life because of what happened. But you're more involved with him than she is half the time." It was true. Marcus brought little David to visit every Sunday, and I'd taken on the role of grandfather with the same dedication I'd once brought to raising Marcus. But there was a difference now. No one was using my love as a weapon. No one was manipulating my desire to be helpful. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, settling into one of the chairs I'd built for the workshop, "about starting fresh somewhere." I looked up from the rocking chair, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time to leave this town behind. Too many bad memories here, too many people who know our business." He shifted the baby to his other arm. "I got an offer from a tech company in Colorado, mountain town, clean air, good schools for when David gets older." The thought of Marcus moving away should have panicked me. After everything we'd been through, after fighting so hard to rebuild our relationship, the idea of losing him again was terrifying. But as I watched him with his son, I realized something important. I wasn't the same man who'd been abandoned at this house 2 years ago. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," I said, and I meant it. Marcus looked surprised. "Dad, I wasn't asking for permission. I was wondering if you'd come with us." The words hit me like a gentle wave. "Come with you?" "Not to take care of David. I know you're not looking to raise another baby at 62, but maybe to be near him as he grows up. Maybe to have a real relationship with your grandson instead of just supervised visits." I set down my tools and really looked at my son. He was 35 years old, successful, and capable, but in that moment, I saw echoes of the little boy who used to follow me around the house, asking endless questions about how things worked. "What about Sandra?" Marcus shrugged. "What about her? She made her choices, and they have consequences. I won't keep David from her, but I also won't let her dictate how the rest of us live our lives." I thought about it seriously. Colorado meant leaving behind everything familiar. This house, Mr. Rodriguez and his family, who had become dear friends, the small community of neighbors who now knew the truth about what had happened and treated me with genuine respect rather than pity. But it also meant something else. It meant being part of a family again, not as someone to be managed or controlled, but as someone whose presence was genuinely wanted. "I have a workshop full of tools and half-finished project," I said finally. Marcus grinned. "Colorado has plenty of wood. I hear the furniture makers out there do pretty well." Over the next month, we made plans. Marcus sold his house, the one he'd shared with Sandra. the one filled with memories of lies and manipulation. I put my house on the market too, though I kept it long enough to finish several pieces of furniture I'd been working on. Mr. Rodriguez helped me pack, his English much improved from our 2 years of friendship. "You are a good man, David," he told me, as we loaded the last of my woodworking tools into the moving truck. "You deserve happiness." Sandra called Marcus the night before we left. I could hear her voice through the phone, high and agitated, as she demanded to know why she wasn't consulted about the move, why she hadn't been given a chance to relocate near her son. "Because you lost the right to make those demands when you chose money over family," Marcus told her calmly. "David will have your address. If you want to be part of his life, you'll find a way that doesn't involve manipulating or controlling anyone." The drive to Colorado took 2 days. Marcus drove the moving truck while I followed in my pickup, baby David secure in his car seat beside me. It felt strange, being trusted with something so precious, after years of being treated like I couldn't be relied upon. We settled in a town called Boulder Creek, nestled in the mountains with a population of just under 10,000. Marcus's new job came with a substantial signing bonus, enough to buy a house with a separate apartment above the garage, not because I needed to be hidden away, but because we both valued our independence. Within a month, I'd set up my workshop in the basement and started taking custom orders from locals who appreciated handmade furniture. Word spread quickly in a small town, and soon I had more work than I could handle. For the first time in years, I was building something with my hands, not just to survive, but because I loved the craft. Marcus and I fell into an easy routine. He worked from home 3 days a week, allowing him to be present for David's daily needs. I helped when I could, holding the baby while Marcus was in meetings, teaching him simple woodworking techniques as he got older, sharing the quiet moments that make up a real relationship. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching 2-year-old David chase fireflies in the yard, Marcus turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dad, I owe you an apology." I looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For not fighting harder to stay connected. For letting Sandra convince me that you were fine when my gut told me something was wrong. For being so focused on my career that I forgot the man who taught me everything about integrity and hard work." I watched my grandson stumble after a particularly bright firefly, his laughter echoing across the valley. "Marcus, we both made mistakes, but we're here now, and that's what matters." "Still," he persisted, "I should have known. A father doesn't just stop caring about his son. If the situation were reversed, if David ever tried to cut me out of his life without explanation, I'd move heaven and earth to find out why." I smiled, remembering the fierce determination Marcus had shown when he discovered Sandra's lies. "You did fight, son. When it mattered most, when the truth finally came out, you chose what was right over what was easy." Doris Poole. As if sensing we were talking about him, little David ran over and climbed onto my lap, his small hands sticky with the remnants of the ice cream Marcus had given him after dinner. "Grandpa," he said in his clear, 2-year-old voice, "build me something?" I looked down at this perfect little boy, this second chance at being part of a family, and felt a peace I hadn't experienced since his father was small. "What would you like me to build you?" He thought seriously for a moment, his tiny brow furrowed in concentration. "A castle for my knights," Marcus laughed. "That might be a little advanced, buddy." But I was already picturing it in my mind, a wooden castle, complete with towers and a drawbridge, sized perfectly for a little boy's imagination. "I think a castle sounds like exactly the right project," I said, ruffling David's hair. "But first, you'll have to help Grandpa in the workshop. Learning to build something properly takes time and patience." As we sat there in the gathering dusk, 3 generations of the same family, finally at peace with each other, I realized that Sandra had been wrong about everything. She thought family was about control, about managing other people to serve your own purposes. She'd thought love was a tool to be wielded rather than a gift to be shared. But real family, the kind we were building here in this mountain town, was about choice. It was about showing up for each other not because you had to, but because you wanted to. It was about building something together that was stronger than any individual part. The rocking chair I'd made for David sat on the porch beside us, waiting for him to grow into it. But he was already growing into something else, a relationship with his grandfather built on honesty, respect, and the simple joy of spending time together. As I watched him chase fireflies with his father's protection and his grandfather's encouragement, I knew we'd all found our way home.